What influences a person to do what they do? What inspires a person to create? What background? What knowledge? Where does it all start? And where does it come from? What makes a person? Alright, g'day there. I'm Richard MUSGRAVE-EVANS, and today what I'm going to do is answer a YouTube tag that I've had given to me, a request from my good mate Rick at the YouTube channel Nagualero. I think that is how you pronounce it, Rick. Correct me if I'm wrong. Rick has a great wilderness channel in Sweden, bush camping, bush survival skills, bushcraft, as well as a fellow plein air painter. Anyway, Rick, as you know, one of these days we're going to plan a trip where Rick and myself are in Australia and we'll head off into the outback. Now that should be fantastic. We should get some great videos out of that, Rick, and can't really wait. Should be good. Anyway, so Rick had been passed a tag and he's answered that, and now he's tagged me to answer the same question. And here's the question. Alright, in the early days when you were starting out, what with three of your favourite books that got you involved in doing what you're doing? Okay, and he's also put another one on the list. What is your favourite knife, if indeed you do have one? Alright, well, yeah, I do have a favourite knife. It's more to do with painting rather than cutting things, but anyway, we'll get to that. I might start with the books. Alright, Rick, as you know, and as most people who are watching this know, I'm a plein air artist, which means I paint direct from the subject, outdoors, on location. And because of that, when I was younger, I was inspired by the early Australian Impressionists. And they were around the 1880s, 90s, very similar to the French Impressionists. Now the Australian Impressionists were the first Australians to actually go out in the landscape and paint direct from the subject how it looked. Rather than looking at the Australian landscape through European eyes, the Australian Impressionists, the Heidelberg School, were the first to actually get out there, camp out there and paint out there. Alright, so the first book is called Golden Summers, and it's about the Heidelberg School. And this book is very inspirational. It's mainly a picture book. Of course it's got a lot of words too, but what I find interesting about it, this is from Jane Clark and Bridget Whitelaw, what I find interesting about it is the direct paintings done from nature, plein air in the early days, and that's what inspired me. You've got work done with the land of blue and gold, the Australian landscape, rather than a European landscape. So these are the first guys that got out there and did it. And as a younger person, I was very influenced by that, and that became my obsession, I guess. So, the classic, The Breakaway by Tom Roberts. And as you can see, there's a brilliant Australian sunlight in these works, and directives from nature, and that's exactly what I'm about. So there you go, number one, Golden Summers, the Heidelberg School and Beyond. Great book. Now, of course, if you're going to go out there and paint on location, you also need to camp out there if you're out in the wilderness and you're quite away from home, and you need to know how to look after yourself and cook and etc. So, my next book. So this is Camp Oven Cooking. This is with Jack and Reg Absalom. This has been very inspirational and basically taught me how to cook in the camp oven. Now the camp oven is really just the Australian word for Dutch oven or whatever you want to call it, but for some reason Australians call it camp oven. Now I found this book great because what it did, basically It teaches you how to cook in the oven. It shows you all the different ovens, and it shows you how to get the right heat, how to preheat the oven, etc, etc. Different ways to block the wind from the coals when it's a windy day. And of course, did you hear that? Sounds like someone's got the gun out. Alright, recipes. Beautiful recipes in the camp oven. So, as a young person heading out into the bush, I found this book absolutely... What? Gunshots, great. Alright, I found this book very inspirational as a young person heading out into the bush for the first time. So, there you go, my second book, Outback Cooking in the Camp Oven. Second book, Outback Cooking in the Camp Oven by Jack and Reg Amsalom. Fantastic stuff. Okay, now my third book. Now if you're going to go out in the bush and you're going to muck around... Forgive me if I'm wrong, but is that the Kelly Gang and their last stand at Glen Rowan that I'm listening to? If you're going to go out in the bush and you're going to be out there, and sometimes it can be dangerous, it can be hot, it can be isolated, all sorts of stuff in the Australian bush. So, this next one, Outback Survival by Bob Cooper. Now that's a great book, because what that does, that teaches you about any sort of scenario that you may get into. Lack of water, how to find water. Snake bites, how to deal with that. Anything along the survival sort of thing. This has been a great book for that. Hopefully you don't need most of it, but it teaches you all the stuff that you may need, from bush tucker, bush survival kits, the whole works and jerks. So this is my third book by Bob Cooper, Outback Survival. Another great book. All right. So that's pretty much it for the books. Now, as far as knives are concerned, I do have a favourite knife. I don't actually use a heck of a lot of knives, I just use what I need. And of course, this one is the one I use. And you've all probably heard of it. It's just a trusty old Leatherman. Of course, it's got everything, all the gadgets, pliers, screwdrivers, whatever you need. Being a practical type of person, I like all that sort of stuff. And of course, you've got your nice knife blade. Now, I find that is pretty much the only knife I really need to use. I don't feel like I need heaps of knives. That's pretty much covers all the things that... Of course, the palette knife. Okay, so here's one of my knives. That's not necessarily a knife, that's a knife. Okay, now these are two of my favourite palette knives that I use pretty much non-stop when I'm painting. This one is obviously great for big marks, big picture. This one, believe it or not, which is still fairly large, this one's by Liquitex, is probably my favourite. This one's from Art Spectrum. This is a fantastic knife too. Right, I'll start with the Liquitex. What's great about this knife is the fact it has a beautiful flex. It's a bit like a bow on the bow and arrow. It starts off very thick here and stiff, very quickly thins off, so the end is a lot more flexible than the rest of it, a bit like a bow. The benefit of that is when you're applying paint on the canvas, because the end's very soft and pliable, as you're pushing it on, it bends the end back and stops putting marks into the actual canvas and the work, so you can apply the paint beautifully without getting those harsh marks that palette knives can be known to give. So, Liquitex knife, fantastic. As I said before, this Art Spectrum one's also a beauty. She's bigger and has the great flex too. But I find this knife is absolutely beautiful for when I've blocked in a whole lot of stuff. And then I think maybe there's a little bit too much information there and I want to generalise a bit more and abstract the picture. Quite often I'll get this big beauty out and just smear certain areas. That pulls all the colours together, gives you that beautiful abstract realism effect. Alright, well there you go, Rick. That's pretty much answered all the questions. There's my 3 favourite books that got me influenced and started in the early days. and my 3 favourite knives: Leatherman, Art Spectrum and the good old Liquitex. Alright, so now what I'm going to do is tag another person. I'm going to tag a person, the same questions, and hopefully he can get back to us and answer it for us. Alright, so the person that I'm going to tag is Brett from Roaming the Outback. So Brett from Roaming the Outback has a classic little channel. What he's got is an old Land Rover Defender that he's totally customised and rebuilt. Set it up for perfect touring in the Outback. And what he does is he'll tour the Outback, making videos as he goes and explaining all the places. Great stuff. Alright, so Brett, I challenge you. What are the 3 books, your favourite books, that got you started in the early days into doing what you're doing now? And do you have a favourite knife? And if so, what is it?